What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the GTD episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we're going to be doing our power rankings recap. So, over the last month, November, first week of December, we're essentially going to break down what went on, what went through. We're going to go through what went on. We are done with bye weeks. We are now into December, the final 4 weeks of the season. We have a very, very clear picture on both sides now of how this playoff picture is going to take place. So, I'm excited to break this all down. Decent amount of movement in the middle, some kind of staying stagnant, the same up top and down below. But we're going to kind of filter through all these teams and just kind of talk about we're going to debrief a little bit about all these teams, what's happened, what to expect, and all that stuff going forward. So with that being said, if you are new to the channel, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I know we do weekly NFL breakdowns, whether that's showdown main slates, but at the same time, it isn't always as fun if you're not as much in the DFS streets or fantasy football realm. So I do like kind of stepping away from that to do some of these types of videos, doing kind of an overall broad perspective of things, doing predictions and all that stuff. So as we're getting away from the regular season, we're going to be doing more and more into the actual predictions of things and recapping stuff and all that fun stuff, which I know will bring more views and content and plus hopefully more interaction with you guys. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are too. And let's break it all down. So starting it off, most teams you've probably seen here before, and Emery might not like who's at the very, very bottom, or maybe he does, depending on, because I know he loves doing draft content. But you've seen a lot of these teams towards the bottom throughout most of the season. The Raiders being 32 is just kind of more so about they just are not playing close unless it's a team versus. They're not really playing games close unless it's a game versus Denver or losing a close game at home versus Jacksonville. I mean, they're getting handled by Cleveland, who's been dead last or one of the worst teams throughout the entire season. There's just a lot to fix and a lot wrong with what this situation is. In hindsight, we can't really go back and say that, oh, this was always a terrible move and decision. Going with Pete Carroll, bringing him in and out of retirement as a head coach, going with trading for Geno Smith and all that stuff, because everybody way back when Sam Darnold got paid in Seattle, they shipped Geno off. Everybody considered Seattle was a downgraded quarterback situation, and Geno was an upgrade over the Gardner Minshew's and the Aiden O'Connells of the world. And obviously that has not been the case. We can't always just assume that talent just it can't get much worse, because we've seen multiple situations years in a row where, like Aaron Rodgers, all it takes is just being better than the committee of terrible quarterback play they had in 2023, and in 2024 it was worse, even with what was perceived to be a more talented quarterback. So they put themselves in a position to where they are fighting for the number one pick, and really the only thing that matters going towards the rest of the season, because they're playing a Philly, a Houston, and Kansas City teams who are fighting for playoff seeding, playoff lives, and play much, much better football. So they got a home game against the Giants, and that could very well come down to who has a top 3 pick and who does not. We'll get into the Giants schedule when we break them down a little bit, but a lot of just kind of, and this is just kind of going to be a very interesting spot, because no one's really raving about this being an excellent quarterback class. Yet there's a lot of teams down low that you could very well consider if they had the first pick or had the position to take the first quarterback off the board. They very well might. And so with the Raiders being in that position, they just extended Geno Smith. But based on the way he's played, maybe they instantly pivot, go a different direction, just completely 1-year reset after just this experiment situation did not work out, after a lot of people considered them as a dark horse to be a wild card team or something of that nature. So a 3-14-ish team is kind of the way this situation is this season is gonna end, and I don't really see there's much optimism for them to be on another slide other than the final one when we do this recap at the end of the season. Going to Cleveland, the only reason that they are not last is because they were able to beat the Raiders on the road a couple weeks back. They've just been consistently awful this season. There's no other way around it. I mean, they've lost to the Titans, they've lost to the Jets in recent weeks, and no competitive game. I mean, they've lost bad situations and games, and like they've lost a lot of just tough games of just very winnable. They've lost a lot of games where you just think they should have no reason losing this game. One of those, case in point, was this very game against the Titans, who, kind of similar to what I said about the Raiders being behind the Browns. The Titans are only not dead last or one of the bottom two like they have been all year because they solely beat Cleveland this past week. And I know I'm happy at least that Shadur is getting a look because now you have to know going forward, are you in the quarterback market again, or are you just going to let your quarterback by committee, whether that's Deshaun plus any vet that you bring in plus Shadur or even Dylan Gabriel, like, is there a guy on your roster that will be the quarterback going into 2026? And I don't know if they know the answer to that. I certainly don't know the answer to that. Shadur is getting a lot of highlights and clips and stuff like that, which is cool to see. Obviously, the first Cleveland quarterback to win his first start in however many plus years. This past week, he throws for 364 and 3 touchdowns. That was good enough to almost beat the Titans, who are the worst team or one of the worst teams in football at home. So there's just a lot wrong, and really the only upside of this team and situation going forward is that they do have multiple first-round picks because Jacksonville did pay a premium. But we've said that before. I've said that in other I've said that in numerous off seasons since we've been a podcast, is that Cleveland has had multiple first rounders before. So just because they have the capital doesn't mean they're instantly going to turn around. We've seen the Raiders when they had a big trade for Khalil Mack just have 5 first rounders in 2 years and just squandered that opportunity. Those kinds of situations for dysfunctional organizations, there's not really a whole lot to look forward to, but at the same time, there's opportunity to see what can happen. And I guess the only optimistic thing to take away from this year is the fact that Myles Garrett is very much on pace and has a shot to break the NFL sack record, which has been tied a couple times, but has not been exceeded. But all that's led to you being the best defender in football, getting extended like you did, is that you're still 3-10. You're still the Browns, and you're still at the very bottom on the first slide of most power rankings videos year in and year out. Tennessee, you got to win. It doesn't feel as fluky as the Arizona one, I guess. Remember, that was the one that they had a drop ball at the goal line and then an interception that rolled into the end zone, and then the offense recovered it for a touchdown. That's how you won your only game leading up to this point. At least this one, despite Cleveland almost tying it up at the end, you did actually earn that win on the road. Good for you. It still just feels like there's a lot more work to be done on this roster. Didn't think they were this far away. I thought they'd be a scrappy 4th place team to get 5 or 6 wins, and that certainly has not been the case. So going into the year, similar to what we said about the Raiders and the Giants, like the marquee game is just Tennessee week 17. And funny enough, both of those games take place in week 17. But them versus New Orleans, very much a top 3 pick oriented game on whoever loses is in good shape, and whoever wins probably wins too much to put themselves in a situation to where they can control what they truly want to do. But at least you can know that Tennessee is one of these few teams in the very top of the draft board, Giants being one of them as well, that you are not going to be going quarterback that early, because both of those two teams were the only 2 teams to draft a quarterback in the first round last year. And Shadur, yes, he's a rookie, but the thing is, he still has to earn the job. Whereas Cam Ward, who's been, I wouldn't say, I don't know if I could say awful, but either way, they have the worst point differential in the entire NFL right now at minus 156. 30th being the Saints are minus 109. So big differential just between the last couple teams, and they're just barely holding on to games that they've actually won this year. So they're probably going to get stomped against most of these teams, and I just don't know what New Orleans, at least New Orleans has looked more competitive and better throughout most of the last half of the season, but at the same time, wouldn't be shocked if they won that one as well. So all these teams are really vying for it. Giants, similar ordeal. Problem is, Jackson Dart, you need to protect yourself, buddy. I know you're living off the flash and the highlights, but since Brian Daboll has been fired, it's not like there's been any kind of improvement from this offense or anything that's warranted, like, oh, we made the right decision. It's still, you're still losing games. I don't think you've won one. Yeah, you definitely haven't won one since Brian Daboll was fired. Most games are, I guess, somewhat competitive, but 2 of them were with Jameis Winston, a quarterback, because you concuss yourself, because you were in the concussion protocol or getting checked for one for the fourth or fifth time this year. You need to learn to protect yourself. And on top of that, the first game back that you had, the first opening minutes of the game, you take two unnecessarily large hits that were perfectly legal. It's just all about protecting yourself. The only thing you can say is that they are playing 4 losing record teams to end the year, and they might play their way out of the top 5 of the NFL draft. If they do that, it's not the end of the world because they're not taking a quarterback. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of optimism going forward. It doesn't feel like we for certain know that he's the guy. I know he's shown flashes. It's cool. Well, a lot of people have shown flashes and all of a sudden just have a big slump, and you just all of a sudden start questioning once again. Like CJ Stroud breaking records and leading teams to a division title and a playoff win, and then all of a sudden in year 3, people will start questioning, oh, Davis Mills looks pretty good in relief for him. No, it's not the same. With Jackson Dart, yes, you've shown flashes, but you're 2-11, and I know there's a lot more wrong with this roster that you can't control, but there's still more that needs to be done in my eyes for this team to even be close to competitive. I just feel like the 3 teams above them in that NFC East have largely separated from them. I did not expect Dallas to be this much better than the Giants. From a roster perspective, I guess in hindsight, that was a bad call on my part that thought that Dallas had a chance to be this bad. But the Giants have been dysfunctional. They've been one of the worst records over the last decade and a half since their Super Bowl season in 2011. Good luck to you. I just think there's a little bit of a gap for you to even catch the third place team in your own division, and that's never a good thing, especially when the division isn't as strong as we thought it would be, and it's kind of getting back to the NFC least stages with Philly being inconsistent, Dallas being 6-7-1, Washington having a basically lost year because they're the team that's been caught. And then Washington arguably has caught the biggest amount of injury bugs with their quarterback just year from hell, 4-5 different types of injuries, multiple starters on both sides of the ball going down for multiple weeks and stretches this year. So it's kind of more of a you give them a pass. With the Giants, they've been healthy for the most part for the best situations other than Cam Scatterboo. That's the Giants, other than Malik Neighbors, who went down earlier in this year. Cam Scatterboo, I guess, he was providing a spark as well. I know the Giants lost Cam Scatterboo earlier in the year, and then also even earlier than that, Malik Neighbors. So we don't even know what a connection with Jackson Dart versus Malik Neighbors looks like. And it could be sexy for the first couple of weeks, but you just don't know. Something tells me that if Malik Neighbors was dealing with what Justin Jefferson was dealing with so far this year, and he's handled it like a perfectly great pro that is not getting the ball, something tells me that Malik Neighbors would show a little bit more upsetness and emotion, more so like a AJ Brown than letting it just happen if they're winning or not winning games. So yeah, I just don't really know what this looks like going forward. I don't really know if they have any pieces that are just lockstep going forward. Abdul Carter, what we thought was going to be the best prospect in this draft, has just not been good at all, and he's been benched and not started in recent games because of, I don't know if it's disciplinary issues, poor play, but that's a long way coming from asking from Lawrence Taylor for his number. So if you ask Lawrence Taylor for your number, one that should never be worn again for that franchise, and then you put up this kind of rookie year, it just makes you feel like, do we have anything on this roster that's correct? Obviously, don't have the coach, maybe not have the quarterback, and then yeah, it could just be they just need to reset this roster and just go from there. Going through these next few, a lot of 3-10 teams, obviously, in this league so far, but at least for the most part, these teams have been kind of more competitive in recent weeks. The Jets, I don't really know what to make of them because Tyrod Taylor took over for Justin Fields. Justin Fields was benched, and it feels like his days are numbered as a starter in the NFL, but maybe he does have a Sam Darnold kind of revival if he ever gets into a better situation. But at least for the Jets, he's done for it. Tyrod Taylor goes out, so now it's just a bunch of bad quarterback play, and they're going to be very much at the bottom of this division. They're going to be very much at the top of this draft board. I mean, there's pieces at least that you can say on this team, but there's also some decisions you have to make because some lone bright spots like Breece Hall free agent? What do you do with him? You already traded off a bunch of your best players, Sauce Gardner being one, Quinn Williams being the other. So you also have a ton of draft picks, especially in 2027, which is going to be one of the better classes over the last half decade. So you got 3 first rounders in there. That's cool. Well, that's not going to help you this year. That's not going to help you next year. Next year you have multiple firsts as well. I just think they're kind of one of the wait and see. It makes you, I don't know why, but it makes you feel slightly better compared to what the Giants, who share their stadium with them. But at the same time, you still feel like there's a gap between the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Patriots. Obviously, long way to go. They're in a tough conference. All of a sudden, they're in a tough division. Conference is pretty deep, and it just feels like they're still a little ways away from even being a wild card contender. So maybe they can improve next year, but I still think it's a multi-year project for them, and they'll still be kind of in this range next year. And again, who knows? Like, they're definitely going to be in the quarterback market because of how Justin Fields has played. Tyrod Taylor being kind of a journey back up over the last few years. So I don't know what direction they go. Do they go the vet route? Well, that didn't work with Aaron Rodgers. Do they go the rookie route? Well, that didn't work with Sam Darnold. Will they go a potential QB revival route like a Daniel Jones or a Sam Darnold-esque now with Seattle? Well, none of that's worked for them. So I don't know what the answer for them is, but I just know that they have a lot of makeover to do on that offensive side of the ball. And it to be determined on how you view this team going forward, but they have the assets, the resources, kind of similar to some of these other teams. Maybe a little bit more optimism, but it still is not that much. It's just minuscule, if anything. Washington, like I mentioned, year from hell in terms of injuries, and Jaden Daniels came back, and then they just got blanked 31-0 by the Vikings, who have been not playing great football either. They have not won a game since week 5. I mentioned this in the last video. It's funny how that Chicago-Washington game last year completely vaulted Washington in a different direction and Chicago the other direction. And since that very game, they have not won a game still. And then Chicago, until last week, which Chicago lost a close game on the road against the Packers, they were the 1 seed in the NFC, which no one really saw coming going into the month of December. So very different directions, very different paths. At least Washington, you can chalk it up to injuries because they've had quarterback injuries, receiver injuries, defensive injuries they've been decimated by. So I don't know if they can get back to their NFC championship appearance ways next year, but they're going to be better than what this record indicates. There's always a team that's better than there's always a team like this that just kind of falls into the top 6 or 7 of the draft, and it's solely because they just could not stay healthy. The Chargers have been one in recent years. Dallas has reset before doing similar things like that. So yeah, they have a chance to finish the year strong, but all 4 games are against NFC East opponent. They could drop them all. They could upset a couple. A lot of which ways that this team can go the rest of the year, but they're going to be picking higher up. But maybe that'll be a blessing in disguise, because a lot of times if a year is lost anyways, you'd rather have the better draft capital to kind of help revamp and reset this roster, which now all of a sudden has a little bit more holes, and they could have to make some tougher decisions because of how this season ended. The Saints, they're starting to be a little bit more competitive. In the last 4 games, they've got a couple wins on the road against divisional opponents that are both 7-6. In the Packers and in the Bucks and the Panthers. Those are the only 2 teams in this division that are winning record, and they beat them both on the road. So they've had some competitive wins in recent weeks, and going forward, you look at that schedule. They play the Panthers this week, which they already beat. They play the Jets, they play the Titans, they play the Falcons, who are all vying for top 7 picks in the draft right now. So they're being a little bit more competitive, but at the same time, we said that they'd be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year, but the schedule just might make them win a few more games than you think they deserve to have. So 5-12 in that area and range is kind of on the board. But at the same time, that could just jump them from a top 3 pick all the way to being 9th where they were last year. So they're going to be competitive and be in these games this week. Or they're going to be competitive and be in games like these the rest of the year. Tyler Shuck has looked decent, at least, especially his best game of the year has went against the Bucks this past week. He had multiple rushing touchdowns. but he still has just kind of been okay. On top of that, because of the age, you just don't know if this is the long-term answer going forward. This also is an older roster, and they just need to get some youth to it. I thought I was a little confused that they had these vets like Kamara, Cam Jordan, going into the year before he retired, Tyrann Mathieu, and all these people, Demario Davis, and instead of putting them in situations to compete, they kind of left this roster as vet driven, and that just didn't really feel like it met the timeline. But Kellen Moore has done a pretty decent job with what he came into it with, because no one wanted this job, and he's at least had them somewhat competitive in recent weeks. So had a rough stretch to start the year, have done better. They could finish the year strong and then go into 2026 with a little bit more momentum. Arizona, they're the king of just salvaging with fantasy stats right now. That's really what the only driven interest. They've lost 10 of their last 11 after starting 2-0, most of which has been without Kyler Murray, who has now been ruled out for the season. And all of a sudden now it seems as though they're going to be moving on from him or heavily considering it. So now it's just completely a reset of, do we even have anything up top in terms of leadership and stuff? And we really liked how they did their draft last year. But the problem is the offense is stagnant, it's inconsistent, and there's no reason that they should be more fluent moving the ball with Jacoby Brissett than they would be with Kyler Murray. And it just doesn't feel like Kyler has any kind of chemistry or consistency with any of these guys. And then all of a sudden when he goes out, Michael Wilson's averaging to be on pace for 2,000 yards in games without Marvin Harrison. And Marvin Harrison has played much better, at least with Jacoby Brissett, but has been in and out of the lineup due to various injuries, whether that's the appendicitis he was dealing with. He missed his last week with the calf, got concussed, and that's kind of had a little bit to do with it as well. But Trey McBride all of a sudden just cannot stop scoring touchdowns. He couldn't score any touchdowns with Kyler Murray. So I don't know what to make of it. This could be a team that could be a dark horse of worst to first, depending on what they do and make. There's just a lot of unknown with the team, but they're at least put themselves in a position to be possibly a top 5 pick all of a sudden again. So they could go the veteran route. They could bring Kyler back one more year as like a last resort if they don't really like the other situations. It's not the best year to be moving off quarterbacks, but at the same time, maybe they just completely want to reset and just want to break it down to the studs and be a team that's going to be at the bottom for a year or two until they really truly figure out what to do. So the only thing really going forward is that Trey McBride's been the best tight end throughout the entire season. Rookies have at least shown flashes on defense, and but yeah, there's still work to do. I wouldn't be shocked if they were a coach firing, quarterback replacement, and then all of a sudden we just don't know how they can be out of the bottom of the cellar going into 2026. Atlanta, you don't feel like after losing 6 of 7 you deserve to jump up a spot, but it's by default. More so, but it's been more so by default because nobody's earned the right to be past that, because everybody's just 3-10 or worse in the slides below them. But they've just not been competitive enough for the talent they have. And I know Michael Penix went out for the year. They've been playing with Kirk Cousins, which obviously he looks like dust as of this moment. But you're losing at home to Carolina. You got swept against Carolina this year. You're losing against the Jets. You're getting blown out at home against the Seahawks. I mean, kudos to you for beating the Saints, I guess. But other than that, it just doesn't feel like getting blown out by Miami. I just didn't expect them to overall be this bad. I expected them to be much better defensively, and it just has not been the case via the run or the pass. So, yeah, they're kind of where they're kind of just vaulting around in the middle of this stuff, and I just don't really know what direction they go. Do they go backward? Do they go forward? I didn't expect them to be a 5-6 win team. I thought they'd be competing once again for the division at a 9-10 win pace, and they just can't win close. They can't win far. They're not winning games they should, especially since week 6. And I'm shocked after that Buffalo game that they just completely shut it off and didn't use that to turn their season around after a tough start. So yeah, they're at the bottom, and they deserve to be. They don't deserve to have this plus, but like I said, it's by default. Minnesota, yeah, I expected this to be a pullback year. essentially they won every close game that wasn't, or they won every single game last year that wasn't against the Lions or the Rams, and which were two of the best teams in the NFC last year. So it's very understandable if you aren't able to beat those teams, and you beat literally everybody else. All the turnovers, the balls were bouncing your way. They were winning all the close games, and usually you expect a little bit of a pullback if the teams are doing so, because all they really did was replace Sam Darnold with AJ McCarthy. But it's been a lot more of a grind. Obviously, JJ has been a meme of late, being called 9, and a lot of people teasing on him because of the way that he's been playing. But I don't think he's as bad as the public is leading on. But he was one that needed the most development of that entire class because he had the least amount of starts. He had the most amount of protection because of the way they played and went into and won that national title. So it's not like he came pro ready. He needed that year behind, and it didn't help that after game 2, he was out for a month plus with the ankle injury. Then he got concussed, and it just doesn't feel like there was time to develop a chemistry with the Justin Jeffersons of the world, the Jordan Addisons, TJ Hawkinsons. So I don't know. He could just completely be bad enough to where they immediately move off him. I still think he deserves a second chance, and this is going to be a very telling stretch because there are games that they should be competitive in. Home games against divisional opponents. You got home games against divisional opponents. One you've already beaten in Detroit. Dallas, I'm actually going to be tailgating at that game with a lot of friends this weekend. I would honestly expect Minnesota to win that game. Probably. Or at least I don't expect Dallas to be as big of a favorite as they are right now, which was like 6 points. Should be a road favorite against the Giants. So if you finish the year 8-9, I know it's not the year that you probably hope for as a Viking fan, but there's stuff to build on, especially if you finish the year strong. I think he needs a full year of just being the guy, having a good vet in the back. I just think we need to give him until next October, and we'll know for sure and for certain whether that they can even move on, whether they can move forward with him, or if this is just completely, we need to just take this out and try again like a Trey Lance San Fran situation, to where it's a good team that just acknowledge we messed up, but let's not hang on to the hope of this. But I just don't think he has enough starts under his belt, and he's shown flashes and big wins. This past week, dominating Washington. I know that's not really saying much, but they've beaten Chicago on the road to start the year. They beat Detroit on the road, so that you're undefeated. So you're winning games against good teams that are going to be much, much later in these power rankings on the road. So I don't know. I don't know. I got a buddy, Nick, that's a huge Vikings fan, and I know he's kind of just pulling his hair out because of what he's seen. But the thing is, it can always be worse. And if you try to chase something when it's not a good year to be chasing quarterbacks, then you're going to be stuck with a Indianapolis Colts situation where year in and year out, they're just changing out vets trying to patch this together, or the Raiders who can't figure it out, or the Giants, the Jets who can't figure it out. Minnesota's too good to be in that situation. I don't know if this is the year to move off him, but bringing in a vet that could take his job and keep it, I think is a very approachable stretch, like a Sam Darnold-esque situation of this guy did not work out on multiple spots, but if he comes in and JJ is bad, we give him the reins, he can at least lead them to as good of a season, to a very, very strong season. And I think that is on the board. So bringing a vet back up, but I would be a little more patient. I think this day and age, especially with social media, people are not patient with quarterbacks anymore. You used to get 3 years. Obviously, this day and age, I think that's too much, but you at least need a year and a half of a season as a starter before we truly know one way or the other if this guy is the guy going forward. So I'd be a little bit patient. That doesn't mean that I know he is going to work out, or I have a feeling. I'm not betting one way or the other. I'm just saying, let's let it happen. We've literally seen about half a season of him as a starter. A lot of it's been bad. But guess what? All these rookies this year have been bad. So if you go into a bad quarterback class and you're just like, we're up here, we got to pick one, or we're going the veteran route where there's not a lot of veterans, I don't believe, to choose from, unless you bring in a Kyler Murray or something of that nature. I just don't know what the fix is if you want to move off him. And sometimes the grass is not always greener when you want to move off somebody. Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's back, I guess. They blew out the Baltimore Ravens on Thanksgiving night, which was cool because essentially in a bad year of the AFC North, essentially running the table could get them into the postseason. And then they kind of squandered that with a whimper, being up on the road against Buffalo in the snow. Back-to-back picks by Joe Burrow, giving that game away. Now they're 4-9 and almost virtually out of the playoffs unless there is a losing record. So they're not technically out of it, but they basically need Pittsburgh to lose out or nearly lose out, sweep Baltimore, win out themselves. And I am just frustrated that there's multiple seasons in a row where Joe Burrow has just got to run the table at the very end just to get in the postseason because they are dangerous. And I don't think that if they did get into the playoffs, that would be a team that you would want to go at home to face, or you would want to go on the road to face if you're a Buffalo or a Jacksonville or a Houston or somebody of that nature. But something's got to be fixed because the moves that they've tried to make on the offensive line, it just does not work. Defensively, they were bad this year. We knew they were going to be bad. And when Joe Burrow went down, that was basically their season because he had to be Superman once again for them to have a chance. Last year, he was one of his best statistical years. They still missed the playoffs this year. Getting injured, they didn't really have a chance as soon as he got back. They had to win out. Impressive win against Baltimore and then missed that opportunity against Buffalo. So they could have put themselves in a good situation or good setup to possibly make it. But you better be careful because I think you could very much be wasting Joe Burrow's prime. And I just hope that for Cincinnati Bengal fans that this isn't another Carson Palmer situation where your franchise quarterback asks out because of the terrible direction of the team that you're putting. But yeah, it's a lot of frustration, and still, once again, we're going to have to be dealing with the Trey Hendrickson discussion throughout the year, and you just don't know what to do or where to go because there's a lot of things that need to be done to this roster to get back to being a contender once again. And that is saying something because of the fact that the Chiefs, the Ravens currently out of the playoffs, the Steelers not looking good in a down year, the AFC North, and you're barely hanging on to even have a chance to make it this early in December is unacceptable with who you have at quarterback. I know he was injured, but that's besides the point. Miami moving up a couple of spots, won 4 in a row. I have not lost since October. And they had a very impressive just blowout win against Buffalo. But then after that, they win a close one against Marcus Mariota's Commanders. They win a close one against Tyler Shuck. They win a dominant one against Brady Cook after Tyrod Taylor goes down. So other than the Buffalo game, which is awesome, there's not really an impressive win on the season. I mean, they beat the Jets way back when they beat the Jets on Monday Night Football way back when. Dominated the Falcons. The result was unexpected, but now that we know stuff about the Falcons, it doesn't feel like that was a quality win. So other than Buffalo, which was just kind of feels like a fluky thing, now all of a sudden you've put yourself in a position to where you have that on the outside looking in of a wild card berth. But at the same time, you got Pittsburgh, you got Cincy, you got Tampa, and New England, all 4 teams trying to be competitive, make the postseason. I don't know if they're going to be favored in a single one of those games. And I think Mike McDaniel, there's a chance he might have saved his job. But is that the best thing in the long run? With Tua, still don't know what to do with him because he has not played well either for the most part. Yeah, it's a gross team. It just feels like they took a even further step back, even though they are close to 500. Devon Achane's been awesome as a fantasy asset if you care about that at all. But yeah, there's a lot of things to do with this roster. I don't really know what to do. I don't really know how they fix it with just 1 or 2 pieces. There's a lot to be done, and I know they're 21. They're being more competitive of late, but at the same time, that could just be very much a scheduling break, and then all of a sudden we find out who they really are, and they finish 7-10 or 6-11, and then we're just like, oh yeah, they just weren't good, and they just caught some breaks. Big drop from the Colts, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Maybe it's a little too harsh of a drop, but it is. There's no team since the trade deadline that has just had more unfortunate luck than the Colts. They traded multiple first rounders for Sauce Gardner. Then he goes up limp early in the game against the Texans, put on IR due to a calf injury, which means he's at the very least out until week 18. And on top of that, Daniel Jones was playing with a broken leg. And then he tore his Achilles non-contact this past week. And all of a sudden, you were thinking about extending him, the playoff run, wide open AFC. And then now you drop 3 straight games. Anthony Richardson isn't even back. Riley Leonard was injured. He played fine in relief in his debut, but at the same time, he's hurt. So now you're asking 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, who has not played since 2020, to try to help salvage your season. On top of that, look at that schedule going to Seattle this week. They're a 14-point underdog right now. Then Monday Night Football against the 49ers, the Jags, and then the Texans to end the year. They're going to be underdogs in every single game, probably by a lot. And unfortunately, they're going to end this season 8-9, 9-8 if they do an upset. And it's just very disappointing based on the kind of run they were having. They were doing very well. And all of a sudden, not only do they finish the year with a whimper, long term, it's like, well, we don't have our first round picks. I don't know if now we have the quarterback because the Anthony Richardson thing didn't work out. This could have been a stretch had it not been for his injury, to where he could regain his reputation, get his job back, and compete going into next year. But now that doesn't feel like a possibility because I haven't heard anything about him coming back anytime soon. So it's just very deflating. And once again, Indy's just been kind of cycling in and out quarterbacks every single year. It feels like they're just back into that mold once again, which is unfortunate because it feels like Jacksonville and Houston is now pulling away when it didn't feel like that was the case just a couple weeks ago. Dallas, you have to give credit where credit's due. They had a really strong stretch coming out of the bye, winning 3 straight. They had a convincing win over the Raiders, came back from 21 down to beat the Eagles at home, and then 4 days later beat the Chiefs. And all of a sudden, it's just like, yeah, they have to run the table just to have a chance. But, man, this team looks much better. But the moves they made with Quinnen Williams at the trade deadline, Logan Wilson hasn't really played a ton. But they got a few guys back from IR, namely Demarion Overshown. They've looked a lot better, and then they just kind of, in a shootout, lose a tough game against Detroit. And now all of a sudden they're 6-6 and just playoff hopes are on life support. And I am impressed the fact that it just feels like they aren't directionless compared to these other teams that are below them. At least there's a path. They do have some moves to make. They have multiple first rounders this year in this upcoming draft. And Dak, gave credit where it's due. He's been playing lights out once again. I said before going into this past week that he had a chance to be the second team All-Pro quarterback, and they may be too bad for him to earn that award. But he certainly played on a Pro Bowl level throughout the entirety of the year, with the exception of a bad stretch here or there. But everybody's really had that for the most part. I think their defense is closer than it's let on from the numbers perspective. Quinnen Williams has been a massive impact, instant impact player since he's been a Cowboy. I don't know if he's the same level of impact that Michael Parsons would be doing, but at the same time, the results are very notable based on what we've seen in recent weeks. Even though Jahmyr Gibbs goes off for 3 touchdowns and David Montgomery breaks one, they've been much, much, much improved against the run. And going into the rest of the season, a lot of winnable games there. I mean, you're a big favorite. I mentioned against Minnesota. I don't know if that they deserve that, but it's going to be a very winnable game. The Chargers are decimated by injury, but it's at home. Wouldn't be shocked if they win that. And then the Giants and the Commanders very much at the bottom of this division, and you've already had wins against them this season. So you can finish the season strong. I don't know if it's enough to get into the postseason, but I don't feel as pessimistic about the Cowboys going forward. I think Brian Schottenheimer has earned the right to be the coach next year, which I was very, very pessimistic on that hire, just because I'm tired of the recycled internal hires because they've done that for 2 decades now. I wanted more of a search, but I've at least liked the chemistry that I've at least liked what I've seen from him, and he at least has earned the right to be coming back next year. Regardless, they could lose out, and I would say that they could lose out the rest of the season. I would still say that because I've just been impressed with how it hasn't been a disaster this year. a lot of the games that they've lost, it's been close games. It feels like on the surface, yeah, why are you losing to Carolina? Why are you losing to Chicago? Well, Chicago's awesome. Carolina, they've beaten a lot of good teams. And Detroit, there's no shame losing to Detroit on the road. The real one terrible loss was going against Arizona. Monday Night Football had to have that game right before the bye, and you dropped it against Jacoby Brissett. That was really the only problem. So yeah, it's just because you don't win the playoffs doesn't mean that you can't really kind of reset and fix some things going forward. So trading away Micah was very controversial. I hope this year with George Pickens, because that's going to be the talking point throughout the offseason for them. If you pay him, is he going to put out occasional effort games like he had this past game against Detroit where CD goes out, he's the guy and just looking lackadaisical, lethargic, and then calling out Hall of Fame players for calling out his effort when that was absolutely the case. And Ryan Flournoy is severely outplaying him. I don't care about double teams. You're supposed to be that guy if you want to get 30 plus million. Double teams shouldn't be the excuse. You're a complete non-factor in a game that you're playing from behind on. And then Carolina and Tampa Bay, they've kind of lumped themselves together. They're both 7-6, and they play each other twice in the final 3 weeks of the season. Tampa Bay has dropped 4 or 5, really struggled lately. At least they are getting reinforcements back because Jalen McMillan is coming back soon. You have Mike Evans coming back soon, which is a pleasant surprise. But Baker, for the most part, has just not been playing great. And I think the defense has been more inconsistent than they would like to have thought coming into the year. And with that said, there's certain teams like that where you have to have that superhuman performances. To start the year, he was Superman. Comeback efforts in each of the first 3 weeks. And all of a sudden, we found out that he's kind of wheeling them to those wins because otherwise, if he didn't lead them to two or three of those games, they'd be out of the postseason conversation outside the top 20. But because of those results, he set themselves up to where they are going to be able to run the table to win the division. And if he gets in there, they won a playoff game last year. If he gets in there, they won a playoff game with him before. And we'll just kind of see what happens with them. But it's disappointing that going into December, they're on the stretch they are, but they do have the chance to finish the year stronger. Similarly to the Carolina Panthers, I know a lot of people are just still down on them because it doesn't feel like a Bryce Young-led team is a threat. But, I mean, they knocked off the Rams right before their bye. They're being competitive in most games, and we're not for just an ugly – and they do have the occasional blowout loss to Buffalo or San Francisco. Just kind of feel like despite Brock Purdy's interceptions, it doesn't feel competitive. But, I mean, there's a way for them to sneak in. I think if either team sweeps the other, like that's a shoe-in to be the division champ and go to the playoffs, that would be a massive step for Carolina. Tampa Bay, we've seen that multiple years in a row now. So maybe they're a little bit more hungry to do said achievement. But either way, they were much more competitive this year, which is a welcoming thing. And hopefully they can continue to build on it because it's a pretty solid young roster. Then jumping up, you got the Ravens and the Steelers, the Chiefs and the Niners. I mean, based on the pedigree of these 4 teams, you don't feel like going into December or this far into the season that they deserve to be outside the top 12, but that's just who they are at this point in time. Baltimore, I thought after the easy stretch they had when Lamar came back that they were just going to run away with this one-team division, and then they lose back-to-back home games against their divisional opponents, being Cincinnati being an uncompetitive one, Pittsburgh being slightly controversial with the Isaiah Likely touchdown not counting. But at the same time, like, why are you putting yourself in that situation? I don't know what's up with Lamar. I don't know if he's more hurt than they're leading on. I don't know if he's just kind of out of it, if he's taking a step back and he's just all of a sudden falling off a cliff. I'd like to think that it's more injury driven because he's constantly been on the injury report. He's also been dealing with the hammy, and that really lingers throughout the season, especially if you're going to be a running style quarterback. But yeah, this is a one-team divisional race. They play the final week of the season, and it's probably going to be a whoever wins moves on to the playoffs, and it doesn't feel like either team really have a chance to be that competitive outside winning a home playoff game against, say, it's the Jags or a young, inexperienced wildcard team. But if you go on the road and you're playing, but it just doesn't feel like that there's any more ceiling outside of winning a home game against a good matchup for you. Pittsburgh, they won this past week, but it just doesn't feel like they're close either. Like, they were handled by Buffalo the previous week. Aaron Rodgers is banged up. He broke a bone in his wrist, and they've gotten handled in competitive games against the Chargers and the Bills lately. Chicago, close loss, but is what it is. You still got to win those games, and there's no reason that when all these teams were down and without quarterbacks and throughout the middle of the season that Pittsburgh shouldn't have run away with this division. They did not, and all of a sudden now they find themselves to where they are entering a tougher stretch of the season, going against Miami, who's won 4 in a row, on the road against Detroit, on the road against Cleveland, versus Baltimore. There's not a shoe-in win at this point against the season, and I think you need to get – I think the magic number is getting to 90. I think it's more than likely that Baltimore is more than likely to do that, even though it looks like on paper that Baltimore has the tougher stretch. I don't know. Kansas City, though, obviously didn't big drop. I kind of held them there for respect purposes that they're losing these close competitive games, but you can't lose every competitive game. That's what it really comes down to, and now their playoff hopes are on life support, especially after the Chargers won this past night. Essentially, with assuming Indy falls out of it, assuming that only one of these teams between Pittsburgh and Baltimore make the playoffs, it really comes down to, because you don't have the tiebreaker with Houston, you're also multiple games back from them. You don't have the tiebreaker with Jacksonville, you're multiple games back from them. It's you versus the Chargers. And now that the Chargers are 3 games above you, they have to lose 3 or 4 or even lose out, and you have to win out for you to have a chance. Yeah, you're going to be favored in all 4 of those games. You're at home against the Chargers, which obviously helps both ways with that. Beating Tennessee, Raiders, and even Denver at home, I don't think that's a stretch where any of that can just win out. They're going to be 10-7. But again, that still might not be enough. And again, it comes down to what the tiebreakers are with the Chargers the final week of the year. It's not like last night's win helps them in terms of the tiebreaker because it was an NFC opponent, but you didn't expect the team to have that dynastic run all of a sudden fighting for their playoff lives. But we've seen it before. Way back in 2002, after Super Bowl win by the Patriots, before their true dynasty started, they missed the playoffs the following year and then won back-to-back Super Bowls. Yes, I don't think that this is like a legacy-driven thing, but also the Chiefs defense, the Chiefs as a whole, it feels like there needs to be some revamp and some youth driven back into both sides of the ball. Offensive line is kind of falling apart. They missed 3 starters. Another one went down, and their backup left tackle went down in this past week against the Texans in a tough game. And yeah, they're on life support. They've got to run the table. I think they will on their end, but it still might not be enough, which is tough because 10-7 teams missing the playoffs is never. It's always a sign of just such a strong conference. I expect them to be back and more competitive next year. It just feels like the football gods are kind of evening things out because last year they won every game in every which way, even if they had no business being in that game or winning that game. Now they can't buy a close win outside of games that they're just easily winning that aren't competitive at the end. They're just losing all these close games, and you didn't see that coming based on the stretch of games and years that they've put forth over the last stretch with Patrick Mahomes. San Fran, we said that they had an easy schedule. They were going to just be in the playoffs by default. They have so many injuries that it just feels like their ceiling is super capped. But shout out Christian McCaffrey saving the season and being available, the only available guy throughout the entirety of the season. And now the rest of the year, you've got home games through your final 4, even against your most competitive teams, and then versus Tennessee, going to be a multi-digit favorite. Indy, at this point, even on the road, would be probably a multi-digit favorite. So you're going to default into a playoff win. You're going to default into the playoffs. And it really kind of comes down to, did you do enough to win your division? If you don't, then you've got a tough road, whether that's going to be going to a cold situation like a Chicago. You could be going to on the road to start your playoff stretch against a Rams/Seahawks or a Packers or Chicago or Detroit or a Philly. And it's hard to know one way or the other if they're going to win any of those games. I don't really know if they would be favored against any of those 5 opponents. Even if they would, it's a really close, tight pick 'em. But they're only a game out, so you can't rule them out of running the table, winning out this season, and possibly having the tiebreakers to win that division. But at the same time, I just don't really feel like there's a ceiling to this team this year. I feel like they're just doing as good as they can. That's why it feels like it might be a little bit low to put them at 13. Coming off a bye, they could finish the year strong, but I just don't really know if I believe in them compared to any of the other teams going into the postseason. Top 12, Philly has a pretty decent drop. I put them and the Chargers right next to each other because that was an absolute, I wouldn't say ugly football, but a lot of turnover-driven nonsense. Jalen Hurts having 5 turnovers. Justin Herbert, literally, I don't know if this stood up, but going into overtime, they were going to set the record for the most pressure rate or the highest pressure rate in NFL history as a quarterback. He was like at 71%. Both tackles are gone. At least they got Hampton back. It just feels like this team is kind of capped as well based on the injuries that they've had at significant positions. But they're winning close games, which is good, and they'll find themselves in the dance more likely than not. That said, none of those games are shoo-ins. And again, I don't know who will have the tiebreaker. If they lose 3 out of 4, Kansas City runs the table. But at the same time, you are not shocked individually if they lose on the road against Kansas City, on the road against Dallas, against Texans, who are the number 1 defense in football right now, or Denver, who is the number 1 overall seed in the AFC right now. So there's a lot of just unknown. I don't know if they'll collapse. They have in the past before. This feels like a 10-11 win situation. And I just don't know if they can hold on enough to, not only make the playoffs, but have a competitive and win a playoff game on the road, which feels like it's going to be the path. It's going to be a road game against a New England, a Jacksonville. It's going to be a New England. It's going to be a Pittsburgh, a Houston. I don't know if you go into any of those environments and win any of those games, similarly to what I said about the 49ers. But they are winning a lot of close games against good competition, which is at least a positive sign. Jacksonville, big jump. They've won 4 in a row after losing to the Texans. They right now are in the driver's seat to win that division. We picked them to win the division to start the year, and they've been very impressive. The thing is, it's not like they're 9-4 driven by Trevor. It feels like they're winning in spite of okay quarterback play, which is frustrating because of how good he is, or at least he is as a prospect, that he just still is not developed to where you're in this. As a Jacksonville Jaguar, you should be in the MVP conversation if you're flirting with 9-4, possible winning the division, be a top 3 seed in the conference, and it just doesn't feel like you're even close to that. I don't really know how far this team can go. I don't even know if they can hold on to beat the Texans, because not only did they lose to Houston, or because they split with Houston. Houston's red hot right now. So if they can hold on, win the division, cool. If not, I just don't know if they can go on the road and beat anybody. That's really what it comes down to. Chicago, their kudos where it's due, man. They last week's loss against the Packers, I don't really take away from in any kind of negative way. You went on the road against Green Bay and almost came from behind and won that game. Intercepted in the end zone. That's as good of a loss as you can have. Outside of that, they've won 8 of their last 10. A lot of close games. They're winning the turnover battle. I think they're plus 17 on the year, which is 5 more than the next best. So they're taking care of the football. They can run the football. They can create turnovers. And a lot of that was when they had a lot of injuries, especially on the back end with Jalen Johnson and other corners missing multiple weeks throughout the middle stretches of the year. So right now, they were going into the week last week as the 1 seed in the NFC. Obviously, after that loss, because of who passed them, the Packers, they were the 5 seed now. But this is a team that can go on the road and win games based on the way they've played, the way they can play. I don't know if they can do enough. At least they play Green Bay pretty quickly. So if they split with them, and then home games against they have 3 home games to end the year. One being the one road game being the 49ers, which is a toss-up to me. So 12-5, on the board, 11-6 still on the board, and a very impressive turnaround, I would say, if they finish the year like that. And they could be a dark horse to win and upset somebody in the first round. So they're a little bit more dangerous to me in the playoffs, and that's why I have them slightly ahead of Jacksonville at this very moment in time. Next up, Buffalo. It doesn't feel like they're bad enough to be this far, but I think there's more pressure on Buffalo than any other team. At this point in time, if the playoffs were to start today, you're going into a playoff without Patrick Mahomes, without Joe Burrow, without Lamar Jackson. Those are your adversaries that you're competing against, because usually when people put the top 5 quarterbacks, all of those guys are in that conversation. And arguably, there's not a single NFC team or other quarterback that even is close to those 4 as a talent. And if you're telling me all 3 of those guys aren't even going to be in the dance, and all you got to face is a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers and then a lot of first-time or young quarterbacks, this is the year that you need to at least get to the Super Bowl. And I just feel like, based on the way this defense is played, because they have not been good recently, based on the way James Cook is not taking care of the football. Funny enough, like, he fumbled at the end zone, and then they reviewed it to see whether or not he not only stepped out of bounds or fumbled it into the end zone. It got called back because it wasn't truly a fumble into the end zone. And then on that very possession, fumbles at the 1 going into the end zone. And yes, he's been impressive, but it just feels like Josh Allen has to be Superman for them to make any kind of run, which is frustrating because this is as wide open of a conference as it has been since Josh Allen has been the quarterback. So if Kansas City's not in it, Baltimore's not in it, Bengals aren't in it, you've got to win. I don't care who you have to play. If you got to go on the road, you should be going all the way. And I just don't know if I have the confidence like I did going into the year where I picked them to go all the way. I still think it's possible. I think it's a much easier path than I thought would even be possible. But yeah, you can't be losing those games. You're behind the Texans, who dominated you a couple weeks back with 8 sacks. Texans right now are lightning hot. I said going into last video that I thought they'd be the highest riser, going from, I think it was like 20 or 21 because of the slow start of the season. And then they kind of split their next 4 games. But then now they've won 5 in a row after being 3-5. Creating turnovers, takeaways. Their secondary is elite. Their pass rush duo is one of the best in football. They just, tips and overthrows, got to get those. Shout out to D'Amico Ryans. He's running a hell of a football team right now. And CJ Stroud is starting to play much, much better recently. He was the better quarterback between he and Mahomes. And outside of when he was concussed against the Broncos about a month back at this point, he's been playing much, much better. So that's a positive sign, because it just felt like he was kind of really slumping for a little bit. Denver, 11-2. I moved him up. I know it was probably disrespectful to move him or keep him outside the top 10 this past ranking. But even though I moved them up because they are by default the number 1 seed at the moment, you're winning close games against the Raiders, Kansas City, who apparently not nearly as good as we thought. You're beating them at home, which is good because you had to get over that mental hump. And then Washington, like, you're going to overtime against Marcus Mariota and winning that game because of a 2-point conversion failed. Like, you're squeaking by, and it doesn't make you feel good at all. They're the same record as the Patriots, and I think they're in 2 different tiers. Like, I don't think it's close right now. Denver has a formidable roster, but it just feels like something is off with this team. And honestly, if it were coming down to a postseason game between them and any of the top 10 to 12, even going to all the way back to the Chargers or the Eagles, or even going on the road against Baltimore or Pittsburgh or any of that, I don't even know if I would pick them to win that game. And that's a problem if you're an 11-2 team. I just feel like something's missing to where they're better than they're much worse than their record indicates right now. But at the same time, like, you got to give credit where it's due when people are winning games, and it doesn't feel like they should be in it. Detroit, number 1 scoring offense. We expected that going into the season. Actually, I did not expect that. I thought they would take a step back offensively, and that has not been the case. They've taken a step back record-wise, and all of a sudden find themselves 3rd in the division right now. but they've got credible wins and an ability to finish the year strong against some very, very telling opponents. All three of the opponents that are NFC related in the final 4 weeks of the season, all of them are road games. One of them is a short week Christmas game, and that feels like 10-7 to me. I don't know which two are losses and which two are wins, but even the Pittsburgh game is not a complete shoe-in. I would pick them to win that game. Probably if there was one that you knew that they were going to win, it's probably that one. But yeah, it's a 10-win team. Even if they get to 11 wins, I don't think that's enough to win the division. So you're going to be going on the road to be able to make any kind of run. And it just kind of feels like it's matchup based, because if you have to go on the road to Philly, or if you have to go on the road to a Seattle Rams, I don't know. I think it comes down to just the path in which they have to travel. I think they could win anywhere based on how they play. But once again, it's just going to be one of those shootout games where it feels like, once again, the corners or secondary is just not there. This year, more so because of injuries. Offense is going to be there, but can they take care of the football? Can they play from ahead? Last year against Washington, decimated by injuries on the defense, so they had to play from ahead, and they could not catch up to the Washington Commanders, who were double-digit dog at home, or who are double-digit dog on the road. So that, I think it comes down to, they're one of the best teams in the NFC. Just depends on the matchup and how far they can go. And then the Final Four, not much movement. 3 of these 4 teams were here before. Green Bay's been doing a little back and forth because they were top 5 the first video, or they were top 5 after October. I dropped them all the way into 12 because of a tough stretch in the middle of the season, but now they're starting to get healthy. They've won 4 in a row. Road game win against the Detroit Lions, and then a home game win against Chicago this past week. Like they won really, really quality games these past couple. Now you got to go on the road to Denver, on the road to Chicago, Baltimore, Minnesota. Like, none of these are winnable games, but they're certainly a really strong team. Defensively, I trust them wholeheartedly. It just comes down to, can you trust their offense? Can you trust Jordan Love? And I don't know if I know the answer to that. But at the same time, going to Seattle, similar thing. I trust their defense, but can you trust Sam Darnold? I think these two teams are very, very, very similar in the same tier. They're neck and neck. That's why they deserve to be next to each other right now. And I would love to watch this matchup somehow, some way, shape, or form. If Green Bay were to be the 1 seed, then I don't know if we'll ever get there. But if Green Bay loses a couple games and somebody else inherits that, then we could find themselves, either way, they have the path, both of them, to be the 1 seed. And if they're not the 1 seed, it's more likely than not they're the 5 or 6 seed than they are the 2, 3, or 4, because of the way their divisions are really, really strong. Green Bay has Detroit and Chicago on their heels. Seattle is right behind the Rams, who are on this list at number 1. And then the Rams and the Patriots. And the Rams and the Patriots, they've been kind of lights out. They've been 2 of the best teams to me, and it hasn't really been close throughout most of the season. I know the Rams dropped a recent game against Carolina. Everybody really has those, and plus it's a cross-country matchup. It's tough to really evaluate those games. New England has been steady, consistent, and they have some of the best quality wins. I know a lot of them haven't come recently because you're playing the Bengals and the Jets and the Giants recently, winning those games convincingly for the most part. But then the Bucs game was one of the best wins of the season. The Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football was obviously, I think, my candidate for best telltale win of the year, where you just didn't expect that result whatsoever, and they found a way to win that game. And now you get to play them this week and see if that was a fluky, or if you truly could sweep Buffalo, have a shoe-in path to being either the 1 or 2 seed, depending on how Denver finishes. And I think they've set themselves up really well, exceeded all expectations. I know they were everybody's dark horse to make the playoffs. I had them making the playoffs, but no one had them at 11-2 going to the final 4 weeks of the season. Rams have been playing lights out. Matthew Stafford is my MVP right now. Has been playing awesome. They're great both sides of the ball, and I think I trust them as a team more than any other NFL team. I trust them more than any NFC team the rest of the way, based on how they've approached things, how everything has looked on both sides of the ball. and they have a lot of quality wins against recent opponents. Seattle, they hung on to win, got their look back against San Francisco, and then a convincing win against Tampa a couple weeks back. So they're blowing out teams when it's teams that they're blowing out teams. They're losing the occasional close game against San Fran or Carolina. But at the same time, it's any given Sunday in the NFL, and you're going to lose games. And there hasn't been an undefeated team since the 72 Dolphins. There's a reason why that's the case. So finishing the year strong, like they have a really, really tough game against Detroit this week, and then a tough short week road game on Thursday Night Football against the Seahawks. I think those games are going to determine whether or not they are the 1 seed or not. If they are the 1 seed, they're still my pick to go all the way, like I had them earlier this season, or like I had before the season started. And if they lose one or possibly both of those games, then you're on the 5 seed, having to go on the road. And while I still think they are capable of doing those kinds of paths, they almost did that last year. That makes things a lot harder, and you have to kind of look at the matchups and the paths of other teams. So a lot of fun situations, and the parity has just never been as strong. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Please leave a comment. Let us know who I have too high, too low. What are your thoughts going into the final month of the season? Who is a team that's a dark horse that you want to be keeping your eye on? Who's disappointed you? All that fun stuff. I want to hear y'all's comments. This is a discussion. This isn't me telling you how it is, and you have to adhere and abide by what I say. Like, that has nothing to do with this video. It's everything about just how I view these teams. Now I want to hear your thoughts, and you have the perfect path and platform to do so, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on YouTube comments. We have a Discord that we drop our daily or DFS lines. If you wanted to go in there, chime in, be sure to look out for those videos coming this week. Next week, Emery's going to update us with our top 50 prospects going into bowl season and reflecting on the opt-outs and stuff like that, what to expect in this class. And we want you guys to be a part of that. Plus, best ball playoffs are starting. Hopefully we have a bullet that can go all the way. We'll see how things transpire. I hope the season has been awesome for you from a betting perspective, a watch perspective, all that fun stuff. Hope that we can interact with you guys going forward, especially as we get into the postseason. But until then, guys, we will see you guys on the next one.